It began as a mission to prevent a massacre as pro-Gaddafi forces advanced on Benghazi in March. More than 17,000 air sorties later, Operation Unified Protector looks very different.
What was initially supposed to be a neutral intervention to protect civilians that were threatened in Benghazi specifically has morphed into being a largely one-sided affair to support the Libyan rebel force to overthrow Gaddafi.
The rebels have come to rely on close air support from NATO. Journalist Derek Flood spent weeks in Libya's western mountains.
I found that the rebels had become almost overly dependent on NATO to where they wouldn't act without NATO actually softening up the targets first.
Coordination between the rebels and NATO has grown. Earlier this month, as the rebels prepared to advance on Brega, their tanks were marked orange to ensure NATO planes wouldn't bomb them. NATO insists it's not in contact with the rebels, but knows people who are.
We don't have direct contact with them, and we follow the situation through allied information sources that is in the area.
Those allied information sources are probably retired special forces soldiers or contractors, eyes on the ground to avoid civilian casualties and better target Gaddafi units.
Western air forces don't bomb without that sort of direct ability to visualize the battlefield, especially when the regime has placed so many of its assets, military and political assets, within civilian protected areas.
At sea, NATO warships operate a blockade to prevent Gaddafi from importing anything that could help his war effort. But in May, they allowed this rebel tugboat to ship weapons and explosives from Benghazi to help defend Misrata, because the journey was between two Libyan ports. Then there's the strange case of the Cartagena, a Libyan government oil tanker. Rebels seized the ship with 30,000 tons of gasoline in international waters and diverted it to Benghazi. But did they have any help? NATO won't say. Running out of specifically military targets, NATO planners have turned to hitting infrastructure, such as Libyan TV, saying it was used to incite violence, and the radar at Tripoli airport. NATO officials say operations will continue for as long as it takes. But takes to do what?
The goal from early on has been regime change, and the latest tactic to see through regime change is trying to cut off all economic and outside supplies towards the regime to make it cease functioning.
After 6 months of attrition, the military balance has begun to tip, especially in the west. If the rebels seize Zawiya, Gaddafi loses the last oil refinery under his control and the shortest resupply route from Tunisia. But analysts recently in Libya don't believe Muammar Gaddafi is about to capitulate.
He still controls, as far as I know, the land borders with Chad, Niger, Algeria. Libya is a very, very vast country, and Gaddafi still controls an immense amount of its territory.
Even after 6 months of Operation Unified Protector. Tim Lister, CNN, Atlanta.